Pesel bat Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch. The many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom ben Yitzchak Halevi, friends of Toby Paris, Sarah Tova bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka bat Yosef, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Oriel Paul Federbush, Oriel ben Rav Shimon. A month of learning sponsored by Charlie Gelfenstein, in memory of his mother, Dacia Gilbas Meir Halevi, and his father, Meir ben Yaakov. Also, Gila and Harold Saltzman, a month of learning in memory of her mother, Eti Bas Yitzchak Elchanan. A week of learning by Esther Slashowski, in memory of her son, Gershon Benjamin ben Harav Avraham, and Anne Adola Klar, in memory of her husband, Mordechai ben Tzvi Zev. Have a day of learning, which is sponsored today by David and Deborah Farber, in memory of his father, Yechiel Michal ben Shimon. Also a day of learning by Jesse and Sarah Miralis, in memory of his brother Avram Moshe ben David, as well as a day of learning today by Rabbi Moshe Kranzler, in memory of his wife, Chayalea Bas Harav Aharon. And Shamas have an aliyah, Krank Rafia, Vati Yeshir, Shem Matzliah, L'chol B'nai Israel, a good gebenched yar. Okay. To get into our material for today, just excuse me a second. Okay. I think Harvey reminded me I need to drink every so often during this year. Thank you again, Harvey. Let's go back just for a moment to the bottom of Tzadi Dalet Amud Beis. Okay. Okay. We see there was a question whether this breach in the wall was 10 amos or less or more. Okay, we pointed that out. Right, and the Gemara then picked up with a statement there, V'ika da Amri, right? V'yeter kuli alma lo plige. It said with the everyone is agreement that that's when it's more than 10 amos, they did not disagree. Okay, ki plige be'esek. But they argued when it was a breach of 10 amos. Okay, V'hada amar Rav Yehuda. Okay, but didn't in this case, we also give an example as we go to Tzadi Hey Amud Aleph, right? Korah Arba, okay, if you have a beam, and that beam is 4 tfachim wide, okay, we're saying that same concept that we talked about yesterday of P Tikra is also applicable. That likewise, it's as if a partition comes down from that beam to create a wall, a mechitza. Okay, so therefore he cites this idea, okay, that matir b'chorban, that in that case, if we have a ruin, one could put up a korah and it would act as a partition. Okay. Furthermore, so this is the Gemara. Rav Nachman Amar, Rabba Bar Abuha, Okay, Rav Nachman says in the name of Rav Barabuha, Kore Arba Matir B'mayim. Okay, likewise, over water, this beam would be, right, the same idea. Pitikra, going down, right, over water. Okay. Now this is where we pick up from where we sort of, according to whom? So the Gemara says, Lahach Lishna, according to the earlier or the first language, the Amad Ba'eser Lo Plige, that says that with regards to 10, they didn't argue. Ba'eser, okay, for Divrei HaKol, okay, and then that this would be according, if it's 10, it's with everybody. Lahach Lishna. But according to the second language, the Ikadam, right? The Amad Ba'esa Plige, that says there that their argument was specifically on 10, right? 10 Amos or less, really. Okay? Kerav, it would have to be according to the view of Rav. Okay? And that's where we sort of left off yesterday. Okay? So Gemara wants to pick up now, okay, and say, given that machloket of Rav and Shmuel, do we have later a machloket Amoraim that, in a sense, repeats it, reflects it? Okay. Lema Abai v'Rava beplugta. Shall we say then that a machloket between Abai and Rava, okay, is similar to or based on that of the Rav Ushmuel K'mithlagim, based on the argument of Rav and Shmuel, right? Because there we saw the following, right? Okay, the Itmar, as it was said, Sichach al Gabe Achsadra. If that one puts some sort of a schach, a covering, right, on the top of a pavilion, on the top of a portico, and it had pitzimin, in other words, it had doorposts. Okay, what happens? Kshera said it's valid. Ein la pitzimin, if it doesn't have doorposts. Okay, in other words, if it's closed in, Abai amar kshera. Abai says it's valid. Rava amar psula, and Rava says that it's not valid. Okay. Now, what happens? Says the Gemara. Abai amar kshera. Why? Abai says that it's valid. Amar pi tikra yored v'sotem. Okay, that he holds by the principle that the extension of the roof hangs over the side of the wall, and therefore, in a sense, or over the side of a house, and therefore it comes down and it closes, it seals. Right? V'Rava amar psula. Rava says it's invalid. Lo amar pi tikra yored v'sote, because he says that he doesn't apply the principle of pi tikra. Okay. So the Gemara then raises the following question. Okay. Lema, shall we say, Abai Karav, that Abai holds like Rav, Rava Kedishmuel, and Rava holds like Shmuel. Okay. That that for pi tikra to apply, okay, that has to have actual walls. Okay? And remember, we said, according to Rashi's view, that the Exadra was simply pillars. And if the pillars are more than a certain distance, they're not walls, right? So what happens? Aliba de Shmuel, then according to Shmuel, Kuli Amalo Pligi. Okay, there is no disagreement. Okay, since he doesn't apply P tikra, okay, that's the point. Ki pligi aliba de Rav, and therefore, where we have an argument is according to the view of Rav. Abai Karav, which would therefore seem to say that Abai says it's valid and he has to hold by Rav. Okay, that therefore there is P-tikra. Barava adkan lo ka'amar Rav Hatam ela dahani mechitzot la'achsadra avidi. Okay, and Rav, okay, in this case, right, there in that case of the achsadra, he only says that that's applicable, okay, where we have partitions for the portico that they were made, okay, that they were made there. Aval hacha, but here in our case, okay, namely, dahani mechitzot lav lesucha avidi, that where these partitions were not made for the purpose, for the intent of sukkah, lo. Okay, therefore he would not apply P tikra in that situation. Now we go on to a new part of the Mishnah. Okay. Rabbi Yossi Omer im mutarim. Okay. Rabbi Yossi said, remember that if they're permitted for that Shabbos, they're permitted for future Shabbos, and if they're permitted, not permitted for future Shabbos, then not permitted for that Shabbos. Okay. Ibayalaho. So the rabbis then raised the following question, okay, and inquired as this way: Rabbi Yossi le'isur or leheter? Was Rabbi Yossi's perspective to prohibit? Okay, in other words, on that Shabbat, okay, or was it permissive to permit future Shabbatot? Okay, Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, le'esur. According to Rav Sheshet, okay, Rav Yossi's point is to prohibit carrying for that very same Shabbat. Okay, right? Tanya nami hachi. Okay. V'chein amar Rabbi Yochanan le'asur. I'm sorry. And likewise, Rabbi Yochanan says it's to prohibit. Okay. Tanya nami hachi. And we have a brighter then that seems to support this view, where it says in the Braita, okay, Amar Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, Kashem she'asurim la'akid lavo, kach asurim la'oto Shabbat. The same way that it's going to be prohibited for future Shabbatot, so it's prohibited on that Shabbat. Okay. Now, says the Gemara, Itmar Rav Chia bar Yosef. Okay, but on this, the following was said by Rabbi Chia bar Yosef, Amar Halacha ka Rabbi Yossi, who said that the law follows the view of Rabbi Yossi, that once you have a breach, even when it occurs in Shabbat, okay, you cannot, okay, it's prohibited to carry, okay, which seems problematic, remember, as we discussed a little bit yesterday, that we saw elsewhere where the Gemara seemed to indicate that once, if it was valid at the outset of Shabbat,
Right.
it should be appropriate throughout the entire Shabbat.
Shabbos. Right.
Ushmuel Amar Halacha ka Rabbi Yehuda. And Shmuel, however, holds that the law is like Rabbi Yehuda, okay? That in this case, it's permitted for that Shabbat on which the breach occurred, assumingly on the principle that we just said, that once it starts, it's permitted on Shabbat, it's through that Shabbat, but future Shabbatot, it's not the case. Okay? Umi Amar Shmuel Hachi, asks the Gemara, and did Shmuel really say this? Vahatnan, but don't we have a Mishnah, okay, that tells us, that teaches us as follows, okay? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, b'med varim amurim, says Rabbi Yehuda, what are we talking about here? Okay. Namely, be'eruvei tchumim, okay, that we were talking about a situation where, okay, if you were making a Shabbos boundary for somebody else, okay, right, then we have an issue, okay. Aval be'eruvei chatzerot, but in a courtyard, eruv courtyard, ma'arvin ben ledad, ben shelo ledad, that it's possible to include someone in that eruv, whether they are aware of it or acknowledge it, cognizant of it or not cognizant of it. Lafisha zachila adam shelo b'fanav. Okay, because we can do something for a person's benefit. Ve'ein chavin shelo b'fanav, but we can't disadvantage them, okay, without their awareness. Va'amar Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel, halacha Rav Yehuda. And therefore Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, okay, that the Amora Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, who said, halacha Rabbi Yehuda, that the law is like the Tana Rabbi Yehuda. Now, notice what happens. Okay? V'lo od, says the Gemara. And not only that, ele kol makom, okay, every place, sheshana Rabbi Yehuda be'eruvin, halacha kimoto. But in any case where the Gemara refers to Rabbi Yehuda, the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, and makes a reference to Eruvin, the law is like him. V'amale. So now we have a question, okay? Rav by another sage. V'amale Rav Chana Bagdata, the Rav Yehuda. Okay? And so Rav Chana from Baghdad says to Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Afilu b'mabui shenital korato, olechio. Are we talking about a situation, if you're going to apply that principle, okay, of once it is acceptable at the start of the Shabbat, and if the wall was breached during Shabbat, Rabbi Yehuda says it's still viable to carry for the rest of that Shabbat. Can we carry over, so to speak, that principle and apply it to the example of a mabui and say, what happens then if the korah of that mabui gets removed, or the lechi of that mabui gets removed on Shabbat? Can people still carry in that mabui, even without those examples there? Okay. V'amarle, and he responded. In other words, Rav Yehuda responded, right? Be'eruvin amarti lach, v'lo b'mechitzo. He says, I was talking about the example of applying it towards eruvin, okay? In that case, okay, we can see, right, for acquisition of a eruv, okay, and particularly eruv chatzerot, v'lo b'mechitzot. But I wasn't talking about partitions, okay? That doesn't mean that the halacha follows Rav Yehuda in that situation, okay? Amar Rav Anan, okay? So now what happens? Rav Anan tells us, L'didi mifresha li minei d'Shmuel. He says, it was personally explained to me by Shmuel, kan shenifritza lekarmalit, okay, that when that breach occurred in the wall, okay, it made the chatzer now into a karmalit, and not necessarily into a rishus yachid, or even a rishus rabin. Kan shenifritza lerishus harabin. But here, in another occasion, okay, where Rav Yehuda basically said we don't follow Rabbi Yehuda, okay, that's when the breach resulted in it becoming into a public domain. And that's where we end there that issue. Because carrying then, in that case, would naturally be, if you're saying then that the breach changes the courtyard into a Rishus Harabim. In other words, it goes back in a sense or returns to its, if you want to say, original status, like that of the Rishus Harabim, which is on the other side of the breached wall, okay? Especially if the breach is 10 or more, okay? Then any carrying from inside the house into the courtyard would still be a change of domains. Right? From Rishus Yachid, the house, to Rishus Harabim, the, let's say, revised courtyard situation. Okay? Okay, let's go on now with our new Mishnah. Our Mishnah teaches as follows. Okay? This is, I don't know if Ted's on this morning. Okay? He'd appreciate, I think, this particular case. Haboneh aliyah al gabe shnei batim. One has built a second story, okay, over two houses. Okay. Now, unfortunately, Art Scroll really does not give us a diagram of this. Okay. Koren does. Okay. So imagine, if you will, okay, if you can look up that my hands are sort of the other houses, and the piece of paper above is another story. Okay, so what do you have underneath that second story? You have a space. Okay, now is that space like a mabui or not? Okay, if it's like a mabui, do we say we need to put a lechi or a korah at least on one side, or maybe on both sides? Okay, so if that's the example, let's see what the Gemara now says. Haboneh aliyah al gabe shnei batim. One has built a second story, okay, over two other houses, and we have a space in the middle. Okay, v'chein ksharim hamefulashim metaltalin. Okay, and likewise, if we have and here Koren also has an actual picture of a bridge, and you have a Rishus Harabim going underneath the bridge. Okay, we can all picture this also. For example, I'm sure some of us have traveled under highway or under railroad bridges that are built that way in the past, right? Sharim hamefulashim metaltalin tachtehen b'Shabbat divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, according to Rabbi Yehuda, then we can carry beneath these two empty spaces. Okay, why? We're going to have to look at, but we might ask the question, does P Tikra apply here from the two sides, okay, of the house, okay, of the second story, or the two sides of the bridge going straight down? And therefore we might not need to put a korah or a lechi there. Okay, or do we say we do need to? Okay, furthermore, says the Mishnah, okay, v'chachamim osrin, and the sages forbid carrying in that empty space area. Va'od, and furthermore, Amar Rav Yehuda, ma'arvin l'mabui hamefulash, okay, that we can also, says Rav Yehuda, make an eruv for a mabui that Art Scroll translated as open. Okay, I think it might be better to translate it somewhat similar. It has, it's open at two ends, a mabui. Okay, maybe it goes from one Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim. Okay? V'chachamim osrin, and the sages forbid. So the Gemara picks up. Gemara, Amar Rabba, says Rabba, lo tema hainu ta'ama de Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, shall we not say, I'm going to phrase it as a question rather than a statement. Gemara says, don't say that Rabbi Yehuda's reasoning is X, but I think understanding it as a question makes it easier, personally. Mishum de kasavar shnei mechitzot de oraita. Why? Because he holds, don't think that he holds that if there are two partitions, okay? In other words, the sides of the first stories, okay? Therefore, you have two partitions, whereas you have two open spaces. That two partitions are enough, according to the Torah, to say, to allow then carrying. Ela mishum tekesavar pi tikra yored v'sotem. Why? Because otherwise, right, it would seem to say that he must hold that then again, pi tikra, the sides of the second story come straight down like imaginary part walls and close, extend downward and seal off the area. Okay, 18. But the Gemara says, we're going to challenge this by Abaye. Yet they're okay. Okay, all the more so. He says, Amar Rav Yehuda, said Rav Yehuda, Mi sheyesh lo shnei batim. Okay, what about, says Abaye, citing a Braita here, what about the situation that we have come across in another occasion, where Rav Yehuda said, we have two houses opposite one another, mishnei tzidei reshut harabim, opposite one another off a public domain. And Rav Yehuda therefore says, in that situation, oseh lechi mikan v'lechi mikan, one can make a lechi by one residence and lechi by his other residence, or kora mikan v'kora mikan, or put a cross beam above one residence and then in the front of the other residence. V'nosei v'notein ba'emtza, and then the person can carry back and forth from one house to the other through what was this Rishus Harabim. Amrula, when the rabbis disagreed with him in that example and said, Ein ma'arvin Rishus Harabim b'chach, that it's not permitted and not possible to make an Eruv Chatzeros in this Rishus Harabim in that manner. Amarle. Okay, so what happens? Rava then answers, Mehahi ein. In this Braita, okay, in this case, yes. Meha, in that case, namely from our Mishnah that we just said about the second story on top of two first-story houses, or the bridge with the Rishus Harabim going through it. Okay, leka lamashma. Okay, no, you can't learn it. Now, Amar Rav Ashi, says Rav Ashi, all right? Namely, he's going to give another interpretation. Matnitin nami daika. He says, from our Mishnah, we can deduce the exact language and understand that. Midikatani va'od. Why? Since our Mishnah said, and furthermore, with another example. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, ma'arvin bebabuid mefulash v'chachamim osrein. Okay? It says that Rav Yehuda holds that one can make an eruv in this open alleyway, but the sages forbid. Now, this is still Rav Ashi's diuk. I amrat b'shlema mishum b'kasavar pi tikra yored v'sotein. Okay, if we're going to say that the rationale was such based on the principle of P tikra, going down and closing, hainu dikatani va'od. Therefore, we can understand, okay, why they teach furthermore. Okay, ela I amrat mishum dekasavar shte mechitzot deoraita. But if you were going to say that Rav Yehuda's rationale was based on the fact that two partitions, according to the Torah, are sufficient to make an area by which to carry, Mai va'od. Why then does our Mishnah then refer to furthermore and moreover, furthermore? Okay, implying that right, that this is the principle. Shmamina. And therefore we learn from this that Rab's explanation is correct, okay, that it's not based on the issue of two walls, okay, but more had to have been, okay, on the basis of P tikra.
P tikra.
Okay, that ends that Adranalach Kol Gagot. And we now get to a new parak, which is the last parak in Eruvin. Okay? All right. A quick word or two about the introduction, and then we'll go right into the text, because it's a long Amud Beis too. Okay? Okay. Gemara has taught us a lot about Eruvin, okay? Both Eruv Chatzerot, Eruv Tchumin, Shituf Mabu'ot. It also discussed situations where there were problems in defining what area belongs to so-and-so. Okay, so let's now go into another aspect of the Gemara, right? In which the Gemara wants to say, but there are still many other questions about defining domains in terms of Shabbat. Okay, take the example of the following. Let's assume someone is at the edge of their Tchum Shabbat and they see a lost pair of tefillin. Okay, are they permitted to go beyond that Tchum Shabbat to save, so to speak, that tefillin? And if so, how do they bring it back into the Tchum Shabbat? Okay. Now, as we go into this particular Gemara, okay, it has an interesting side question, okay, which is, have you ever thought about the fact that if somebody puts on both kinds of tefillin, okay, Rashi tefillin, okay, as well as the other kind of tefillin, Rabbeinu Tam, okay, most people, at least I've noticed in shows, put one on first, daven up to a certain point, take that tefillin off, and then put the other tefillin on, right? Have you ever seen anyone wear the two sets of tefillin at the same time?
Yes, I've seen it.
You've seen it, Mark.
Yes.
Okay, so if we have a couple minutes at the end, you'll tell us about it, all right? In any case, I just point that out as a side bar, so to speak. So let's go into our text. Hamotzi tefillin, one who finds tefillin on Shabbat outside the Tchum. Machnisin zug zug, says Tanakama. Okay, can bring them into the Tchum zug zug. I'm going to say a pair at a time. Okay, pair by pair. Rabban Gamliel omer shnayim shnayim. Rabban Gamliel says he can bring them in 2 by 2. Okay, in other words, he wears 2 on his head and 2 in his arm at the same time. B'medvarim amorim. What are we talking about? B'yeshanot. We're talking about old tefillin, okay, used, so to speak. Aval b'chadashot patur, okay? But if he's talking about new tefillin, okay, he is exempt. Exempt from what? It has to be exempt from rescuing those tefillin that are beyond the tchum. Matza'an tzivatim, if he founds these tefillin in bundles, o krichot, okay, or he found them, in pairs or in bundles, okay, what does he need to do? Machshich alehen u'mevi'an. He must remain there for the rest of the Shabbat till it is dark, and then he can bring them in. That's what the Mishnah seems to be saying. Okay? There, sakana. Okay? Going on with the Mishnah now on Sadi Hey Amud Beis. And in a time of danger, which we always understood to mean particularly a time of persecution, Mechasan, he covers them until Shabbat ends, and then brings them. V'holechlo, okay, and then he actually may leave. Okay? Rabbi Shimon Omer, says Rabbi Shimon, notnin lechaveiro. Rabbi Shimon says, no, it's going to give a different possibility. You give them to a friend, a neighbor. Lechaveiro, lechaveiro. And when one neighbor to another neighbor, ad shemagia lechatzer hachitzona, until they get to the innermost, okay, the first courtyard, the outermost courtyard of the city. Okay. V'chein beno. And let's say, says the Gemara, what happens if his child was born outside the tchum? Okay. In other words, his wife was pregnant. She went with the midwife outside the area and gave birth in the field. And what do you do with that kid? Okay, no lechaveiro. Okay, you hand the infant to a friend, lechaveiro, and a friend to a friend, afilu mea, even if it takes 100 people to eventually bring the infant back in. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, says Rabbi Yehuda, notain adam chavit lechaveiro. According to Rabbi Yehuda, a person could even give a barrel to a neighbor, lechaveiro, and a friend to a friend, afilu chutz l'tchum, even when, okay, it is beyond the tchum. Amru lo, and they said, lo ta'alei chazo yoter miraglei ba'aleh. Okay, that really, the rabbis responded that the barrel should not go, excuse me, any further than the feet of the owner, which is a rather difficult understanding. What does that mean? Well, perhaps the Gemara will address it. Let's see. Gemara, zug echad ed tfeilo. Our Tanakama seems to imply that one pair of tefillin, yes, could be brought, worn in, so to speak, but more than that, no. Lema, let's say, Tznan Stama, the Loka Rabbi Meir. Shall we say then that this Stam Mishnah, okay, is taught, but not according to Rabbi Meir, whereas we've generally learned that a Stam Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, right?
We can't say that here.
Right? The Ika Rabbi Meir, because if it's according to Rabbi Meir, Ha'amar lovesh kol ma sheyachol lilbosh, who, when we saw elsewhere in regards to a fire on Shabbat, excuse me, and one wants to rescue their clothes or other things, Rabbi Meir says as follows: Kol ma sheyachol lilbosh, anything that he's able to put on, va'otef kol ma sheyachol la'atov, and he can wrap around himself any clothing that he can wrap around. Datznan, as it's taught in that Mishnah, U'Lashem Rotzi Kol Kli Tashmisho, okay? Namely that he can remove all the utensils that he needs to use for Shabbat, U'Levesh Kol Ma Sheyachol Lilbosh, and put on all those clothes that he can put on, right? V'Otef Kol Ma Sheyachol La'atov, and wrap himself in all that he can enwrap. V'Hahi Stama, and this is a Stam Mishnah. Mimai the Rabbi Meir. On what basis then do we say, how do we know that this is according to Rabbi Meir? The Katani Allah, because it was taught on this same Mishnah, Lovesh Umotzi. Okay, he wears and takes out. Uposhet v'lovesh v'motzi. And he removes and he dresses again and takes out. Uposhet, and then removes. Afilu kol hayom kulo, even the entire day. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That's the view of Rabbi Meir. So we understand that that earlier piece is also according to Rabbi Meir.
Yeah.
So what about our own Mishnah, our Tanakama in our own Mishnah? Amar Rava, says Rava, Afilu tema Rabbi Meir. You might say it is still according to Rabbi Meir. Namely, Hatam, there in the case of saving clothes from the fire, Derech Malbusho, Kechol Shavya Rabbanan. There, he said, that the same manner in which the clothes are worn as a weekday, that's what the rabbis equated, I'm going to explain it, for Shabbat. Vahacha, and here he says, Derech Malbusho, Kechol Shavya Rabbanan. I'm going to put in the word likewise here in the case of the tefillin, the same manner in which one would normally wear it on a weekday. Also, the rabbis equated it as well. Okay, that's why since we normally only wear one pair of tefillin, okay, in a weekday, that's why Tanakama, according to Rabbi Meir, could say wear just the stam, the Tanakama one pair. Hatam the bechol, kama the bai lavish inyan hatzala. There, as with weekday, right? Okay, kama the bai, what he needs to wear for that purpose of saving it. Nami sharu le rabbanan. Here the rabbis permitted him. Hacha, okay, here in our case of the tefillin, the bechol nami zug echad. So the Gemara is spelling it out for us, that on the weekday, here also there's just one pair. And yes, tfei lo. But more than that, not. Le'inyan hatzala, nami zug echad in, tfei lo. And therefore, for the purpose of rescuing the tefillin, one pair, yes, more than that, no. Okay, now we go on to another piece from the Mishnah. Rabban Gamliel omer shnayim shnayim. Rabban Gamliel said two at a time. My kasavar. What is Rabban Gamliel's reasoning? What is he thinking here? Ikasavar Shabbat zman tefillinu. If he's of the opinion that it's permissible and acceptable to wear Shabbat tefillin on Shabbat, zug echad in tfei lo. One pair, yes. More than that, no. Ve'i kasavar Shabbat lav zman tefillin. And if he's of the view that Shabbat is not an appropriate time to wear tefillin, umishum hatzalah, and we're talking about the purpose of rescue, derech malbush shari le rabbanan. Namely, he could hold that the normal way of wearing something on a weekday, the rabbis permitted, okay? And therefore, afilu tfei nami. And therefore, since one in theory could wear more than one pair on a weekday. Therefore, likewise, more than one pair also on Shabbat. So the Gemara comes to clarify, excuse me, an answer for us the following. Le'olam kesavar Shabbat lavs man tefillin. Okay, right, all the time, clearly, right? Rabbi Gamliel does not hold that Shabbat is appropriate for tefillin wearing. V'chisharu Rabbanan le'inyan hatzalah, and that when the rabbis permitted, okay, for the purpose of rescue, derech malbush, okay, they did it in terms of similar to the idea of wearing clothes, b'makom tefillin, in the place where one wears normally tefillin. Ihachi, if that's the case, zug echad, okay, nami in tefillah. If that's the case, we said one pair also. Yes, more than that, no. Going on. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Okay. So now we have a.
Rabbi, where did Reb Gamliel get the Havamina to say that tefillin are it's okay to wear tefillin on Shabbos?
No, he didn't. The Gemara is asking that question, whether Rabbi and Gamliel holds that.
Right. Where can we get that Havamina? We don't have such a thing.
We don't. But at that time, apparently there were those that did wear it. Okay? Because remember, we understand that the halacha is on the basis of oat, right? That the tefillin is supposed to be an oat.
Right.
And Shabbat is supposed to be an oat. So that was the basis, if I remember correctly, by which we say one does not need to wear tefillin on
We already
Shabbat.
have a host.
Okay? But if you don't hold by that learning, okay, or if it was before that learning was accepted, okay, then we've got that issue. Okay? All right. So what happens? Now we get another statement. Right? What about the following? Okay, can we really fit two tefillin especially on our head at the same time? Okay. All right. Get ready. Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. Makom yesh barosh lahaniech bo shtei tefillin. He says that there is a place on the head to put two tefillin. Now, I will simply remind everybody that remember when we did learn previously, okay, about the Kohen Gadol wearing the tzitz and where the location of the tzitz was. There was a discussion there about his being able to wear tefillin shel rosh at the same time. Okay, so keeping that discussion in mind, we go on now. Okay, so the Gemara tells us, Ha necha darosh. Okay, wearing two tefillin on the head at the same time seems doable. Why? Okay, because we're going to see the situation is, where does the tefillin have to fit? Diyad, my ikalamema. But what about putting it on one's arm? Right? Kid Rav Huna. We say according to Rav Huna, the Amar Rav Huna, who says, Pa'amim she'adam ba min hasadeh. Okay, there are times when a person is returning from the field, v'chavilato al rosho, and he has a heavy package on his head, umisalkan me rosho, okay, and what does he do? He okay, takes this right, removes the package from his head out of respect for the tefillin. Okay, in other words, he doesn't want to crush the tefillin on his head. And what does he do? V'koshrin bizro'o. And he ties it on his arm. Okay? Ema, I would say, therefore, the Amar Rav Huna, that this means that Rav Huna is telling us, Shelo yinaheg bahem derech bizayon, okay, that one does not want to show dishonor, okay, to the tefillin. Ra'ui, it's suitable. Okay, so we now say Ra'ui miyamar, okay, that it's suitable to do this. Elikid Amar Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. But rather we say similar to what Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak says. Makom yesh barosh shera'ui lahanich bo shtei tefillin. That there is an adequate place, amount of space on the head to be able to put two tefillin. Hachanami, here too. Makom yesh biyad shera'ui lahanich bo shtei tefillin. That there is adequate space on the arm to put two tefillin. Tana debe Menashe, and they taught in the academy of Menashe, Al Yadcha, where it says to put it on your hand, Zo Kiboret. That's really the biceps. Bein Einecha, between your eyes, Zo Kadkod. That is the crown of the head. Okay? What is the crown of the head? Okay, we're going to see that in a moment. Heicha, where is it? Amrei debe Rabbi Yana. They said in the academy of Rabbi Yana, Makom shemocho shel tinok rofes. The place where the brain, where the head of an infant is soft. Okay? Lema, that means, do we say, the Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak kamiflige, that maybe they're arguing about the statement of Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. The Tanakama litlei the Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. The Tanakama doesn't hold by Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak. The Rabban Gamliel itlei the Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, and he does hold it. Lo, no, says the Gemara. The Kuli Alma itlaho the Rav Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. That everybody accepts the view, okay, of Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, right? But what happens? V'hacha, and here, b'Shabbat zman tefillin k'miflige. What they're arguing about is whether Shabbat is appropriate time for Rav Shmuel bar Yitzchak, okay? The Tanakama Savar Shabbat Zman Tefillin. The Tanakama holds Shabbat is an acceptable, I'm going to use the word, time for wearing tefillin. The Rabban Gamliel Savar Shabbat loves Zman Tefillin, that it is not. The Ibayat Ema. And if you want, I would say as follows. The Kuli Alma Shabbat Zman Tefillin. That Shabbat is an acceptable time for wearing tefillin, okay, that one can fulfill it, right? Because that way you're not saying, by the way, that tefillin are ornaments, and therefore it's a burden to carry them, and that's why it's forbidden, okay? The Kule Alma Shabbat Zman Tefillin Hu, Vahacha b'mitzvot shrichot kavana k'miflagim. But rather we're dealing with an argument of whether mitzvot require intent. Okay? So the Gemara, however, indicates that here there's a problem of language in the Gemara, and we need really to reverse the following views. Tanakama Savar, let's say by Havana, that Tanakama holds to fulfill, one needs intent. Rabban Gamliel Savar lo ba'e kavana. And Rabban Gamliel is of the opinion one does not need intent. And as I said, the Meforshim say we have to reverse those views. Okay. let's just go over a tiny bit on the top of Tzadi Vav to finish up. V'ibayet ema, and if you want to say instead, the kule ama, let's say lo ba'e kavana. Okay, and everybody, however, is going to agree that one does not need kavana. Okay, and that's where we're going to stop today. We'll pick up tomorrow to finish up this issue between Tanakama, Rabba, and Gamliel, and to continue what really was the basis of their machlok. Okay.
Have a good day.
All right, everybody. Oh, and Marvin, you said you saw people wearing two pairs of tefillin at the same time?
Yeah, a young Swarty boy came, and he came for a few weeks, and he was wearing tefillin were a little smaller,
Yeah,
and I'm trying to remember I think they were on the Rosh that I was able to see clear. I don't remember if they were one on top. I think they were side to side.
yeah. Okay. There is a Sephardic practice that that's the case, that there's some do
Yeah.
wear, say they can wear them both at the same time. Okay, but it's not common. All
Rabbi,
right, everybody.
I never asked them about it either.
Rabbi
Okay.
Green, good morning. Halach
All right,
Lamaisa.
everybody.
Rabbi Green?
Yes, Rob.
Hi. Halach Lamaisa. Nowadays, if we wanted to move our tefillin, are they considered muksa strictly, or can we move them if there's a need? Let's say you need the spot or something.
Oh, you mean if tefillin
Yeah,
are
we wanted to
someplace
move
on
them.
Shabbat, you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question. I'd have to look it up.
Okay.
Okay, but
Okay, I'm not sure.
I would think, like you say, if it's only if
Tzarech
you really
Mokom.
need the place,
With
You need
Tzarech
the
Mokom,
place,
it's
it's
usually a matir.
okay, usually that would be the case. But there may be some people who would hold.
Yeah, but maybe I want to show. I have a new pair of tefillin. I want to show it to someone. Here, look at my new pair of tefillin. I
Oh,
want to,
Well, and on Shabbat, I don't think that's appropriate.
no.
right. Okay, they're muksa. Okay.
Okay,
Okay, thank you very
All
much.
right.
Have a good day.
take care.
Bye-bye.